episode of the show from 2 to 3 today, and he co-hosts for me when I am traveling and on the road, and I've become good friends with him, and I asked him to come in to do our keynote because he definitely is a leader in the industry. He is a leader in information security across the academic sectors. He's developed an accomplished career driving the strategy and management of business transformation, technical migrations, IT data, security, disaster recovery, technology planning. He's found his success has been combining on-hands experience in the information security and cybersecurity to ensure optimal performance. I could go on and on with his bio, but one thing I talk about all the time that I think is super cool is when he was the CISO at the University of Tulsa, he took the cybersecurity students that were in the program there, and he developed his SOC team with the students who now are out there in the workforce as our future leaders. So love anyone that is supporting the upcoming our leaders in cybersecurity. Today, he's going to be speaking on securing the future, CISO insights and industry. Whoop, I just jumped to the panel. Sorry about that. He's going to be moderating our panel, too. He says, things a CISO doesn't want to say, but needs to. So everyone, let's welcome Jonathan Kimmitt.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate that. Whenever Kim reads off all the stuff that I've done, it sounds really good. What I realize is I just didn't sleep very much. So I am Jonathan Kimmitt. I've been a CISO for a long time. I've been in computer security since about the mid-2000s. Started my life as a help desk supervisor. Well, I was law enforcement before that, but as I otherwise grew into the IT career, I went as help desk supervisor, joined the computer security response team about mid-2000s, kind of worked my way up, and eventually they suckered me into taking the CISO role. So I've seen a lot of changes in the environment of cybersecurity over the 20 years or so, 22 years I've been doing this. And about a year and a half ago, CEO of Alias Cybersecurity reached out to me and says, Jonathan, and I knew him, we had met a lot, we've worked a lot on conferences. He says, listen, I want you to come and do what you do, but do it for everybody instead of just doing it for the University of Tulsa. So after 22 years at the university as a CISO, I jumped over to being a vendor. And that was scary, a consultant and a vendor, but I've loved it. But I think it's really given me a unique viewpoint because I'm a vCISO now. I'll do a lot of different things. I do incident response, I do a little bit of pen testing, I do vCISO work, compliance work, gap analysis, auditing, a variety of stuff. But I've really seen a lot of things in the last 3 years. So before I left TU, do I have any higher eds in here? Anybody got a couple? Okay. You guys know what EDUCAUSE is? Okay. EDUCAUSE has community groups. So I would advise you guys to join the community groups. But I was in charge of the privacy and security community group for a couple of years, and we had to do monthly meetings. So I got to meet a lot of CISOs and CIOs of higher eds across the world and work with them and present to them and things. But I started seeing some trends. And it was really odd to me when I saw these things happening and how the CISOs were being treated and or working with the organization. And then I became a vCISO. And I'm going into banks and I'm going into higher eds and manufacturing and all industries. And I start seeing these things. Then I started doing incident response. So I go in, I do incident response. Now I had been doing a lot of incident response anyway, but for my organization. Now I'm going and doing it for companies. And usually they bring us in when everything is dead. Everything is down, nothing is working, they've been ransomwared. And so while I have engineers there to do all the technical work, I'm there to work with the board and the leadership and basically run interference. Again, these things started popping up at me. So here is the presentation that has really come from that. And it's things that a CISO should say, but they don't really want to, but they really need to. So we're going to talk about some things that is going to sound kind of Nick Burnish, if you guys know who Nick Burns is from Saturday Night Live, the IT guy or the tech guy. It's going to sound like that, but it's not, and we'll talk about why. Okay, so that's me. There's a lot of stuff on there. We don't really care about any of that. Down at the bottom, though, kind of my favorite things is I get to host once in a while with Kim and for Kim, the radio show. A couple of other little podcasts that I deal with. I'm working on a CISO field manual. Hopefully it'll be out by the end of the year. All of this really is, I try to give back. I try to give back to the industry and give back to the community. So that's the one thing I want you guys to really take from this. I mean, there's a lot of certifications on there, but those aren't any fun. The stuff at the bottom is a lot more fun. All right, some fair warning about this particular presentation is, number one, use common sense. We're going to be talking about things that if you were to go and say them to your leadership, you might need to get a new resume written up. Which is why that bottom one is on there. Bad decisions lead to new resumes. Use common sense, understand your organization's culture, and build relationships. Now, we're going to talk more about that here in a little bit. Let's see, real quick, let's do some statistics. We've had 50 years of mobile devices. We have more phone subscriptions than we do people on Earth. You guys ever realize that? I mean, I have two phones. There are 6.9 billion smartphone users in the world. When was the first SMS message pushed through? 1992. We still use it. How old is that? And we're using it for multi-factor authentication? We need to think differently about that. There are 23, billion SMS messages sent per day. First emails in 1971. Oh, you guys can see it. Let's jump down to the far right. In 2022, there's 1,802 data breaches, 422 million data subjects involved. Average cost of the breach, $4.5 million. Who has been involved in a breach? Your actual data. So anybody who's in the government, you were OPM, if you've got the credit bureaus, you've got LinkedIn, you've got Yahoo, you've got all kinds of different stuff. You've been involved in a breach. I have a question for you real quick. Has anybody ever died because of a data breach? I see a few heads shaking, nodding, yes. Can anybody give me an example? What was it? Was that an actual data breach, or was it because they got ransomware, they couldn't provide services? So that one, yes, absolutely. So what she said was a hospital I think it was in Germany. I think so. But it was because they got ransomware, they had to turn away an ambulance and they had to go to another hospital, they died en route. But from a pure raw data breach, has anybody ever died? I use 3 examples. Number 1, Edward Snowden. We know that people have died. We don't know their names, but we know, or we have been told, that people have died because of the Edward Snowden data breach. Second one is Ashley Madison. So regardless of what you feel about the Ashley Madison business model, the fact that there was data that shouldn't have been there, and unauthorized release happened, and people died, that's a problem. The third one I like using, has anyone ever heard of the relationship between IBM and the Holocaust? So a few people shaking their heads. You might have either read the book or seen articles about this, but IBM was brought into Germany in the mid to late 30s to do the national census. A few years later, the Nazis was using that information to find and kill millions of Jewish families. Now, I'm not saying IBM had anything to do with the Holocaust, but I am saying that unauthorized access to data led to the deaths of millions of people. Now, specifically, thinking back to World War II and what had happened, that's where GDPR came from. From the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, which stated that privacy is a human right, all the way down to the Data Privacy Directive and then to GDPR, because they don't want that to happen again. Thinking of GDPR and one of the transparency clauses, last session, people were talking about company data on personally owned phones. So let's talk about that just real quick, because that's one of the things I like talking about. How many people here, you have a bring your own device policy or some approval to use personally owned devices to access the company network and or company data? Okay. Do you think your company, to meet compliance requirements of transparency, actually puts in their privacy policy to customers that they allow their staff to take the customer's data and put them on their personally owned devices and take them home? Oh yes, absolutely. But technically, that's required under transparency. So just keep that in mind. All right, current threats. I mean, you guys have probably seen all of these. You've probably experienced every one of these. You know what they are. This is the stuff we deal with every single day. I unfortunately have an honor of being able to see this from the incident response side, where organizations will get hit with this and they go completely down. And then I have to go in with my team and figure out how to get them back up and get them functional again. All right, what is a CISO? So if I asked you that question, first of all, how many people here are CISOs? Okay, how many people are ISOs or CSOs or BISOs, Director of Security? All right, how many people here want to be a CISO? Oh, okay, it's more than I expected, actually. But that is something that we need to think about. What is a CISO? What is the role of a CISO? You'll hear it. People will talk about it. What is the role of a CISO? And I believe a CISO's job is to make changes. Does not necessarily have to be that they're a technical CISO and go and make changes on the firewall, but sometimes you do. I like to think that the CISO's role is to make people think differently. That's what we do. That's what we should do. And that's kind of why I'm here today, is by the time you guys leave here today, I want you to think differently about things. Now, if you are a CISO or want to be a CISO, there's a couple of things. You guys have heard about the SEC going after the CISO. If you're in the banking sector or higher ed, you've probably seen the new requirements of you need to have a designated qualified CISO, or a qualified individual in charge of your information security program. That's what the reasonable information security program looks like. That's for GOBA. And then, of course, the bottom, a former chief security officer of Uber sentenced to 3 years probation for covering up a data breach. Who wants to be a CISO now? You guys ever seen the Sally Yates memo? Sally Q. Yates, the Individual Accountability for Corporate Wrongdoing, wrote a few years ago, specifically stating that the DOJ will investigate individual decision makers if there was an incident at an organization. Not only will they investigate the individual decision makers, they will share that information with civil attorneys. So not only might they go after you for criminal charges, they're going to share all the information they gather with civil attorneys. My advice, go do a search for the Sally Q. Yates memo and read it, because when this came out, there was a lot of CISOs talking about this. How is this going to affect us? How is it going to affect our decision making in the organization? What is the liability you're going to have on your shoulders? Now, you put all that together, this is what we've got. CISOs are afraid. How many people here are afraid if you were a CISO in today's environment? Yeah. But you know what? I love being a CISO. I love the fact that we can go in and we can protect organizations. In fact, on my CISO ring here, after a particularly bad case from my previous job, where we had cartels involved and all kinds of different things, the individual who was raping our students, and we found him, specifically our security team did, he got 135 years in prison. Even though it sucked and everything was bad, my team and I, we felt good about all that stuff because we were protecting students. So on the back of my ring, I had engraved to defend and protect, because that's our job. Now, it's kind of hard to do that in some environments, in some cultures, but it's still our job. We defend and protect people. So everything we're going to be talking about here in a little bit, we're actually talking about the things we do with people. The CISOs are afraid, specifically they're afraid to say the things they need to say. How many times have you been in a meeting or in a boardroom or with leadership where you wanted to say something and you didn't because you were afraid that you were going to get in trouble or get fired?
I always heard, like, when you first start a job,
Mm-hmm.
you come in and you see something wrong. What do you tell them?
So we've got a mic coming. So what he's asking, or what he said was, when you come into a job and you see things wrong, what do you do? Do you tell them that it's wrong? Do you have another part of the question, or was that it?
That's it.
Okay. Well, that's a good question. What should you do? If you see something wrong and you have the experience to say that that's wrong, shouldn't you speak up? A lot of people are nodding their heads. Absolutely. I would say yes, you speak up. Do you think it's going to make people angry? Oh, absolutely. This is where this comes down to. Suggest improvements. I'm going to use that a little bit later if that's okay, because we're going to talk about that. I don't have it in my slides, but we'll talk about that. When you are going in to do things, you're going in to talk to people, just like he said, I mean, instead of saying that's wrong or you shouldn't do it like this, you soften it a little bit. You say, I need to suggest improvements. This is opportunities for improvements. I hear this a lot. That's the type of thing we are going to talk about today, are the things that you want to say, things that you refuse to say, but maybe you should say them. This is the first one. No. Now, I have heard for the last 10 years that the security can't be the no team. How many people have heard that? Absolutely. In fact, I went on an incident a couple of months ago. And there was a problem. And I went to the CIO and or the CISO. It's like, why did you let this happen? And you have to understand, when I go into an IR, I have to know the truth so I can fix the organization. So I flat out asked him, like, why did you let this happen? Because I can't say no. What do you mean you can't say no? Every time I go to a conference, they tell us we can't be the no team. We can't say no. We can't be that. We always have to say yes. Oh, okay. Well, that was dumb. That's in the slides. Your job as a CISO at times is to say no. That's what you're supposed to do. Hopefully you've got the experience and the background to be able to say no. I can give you an example. I had a CIO that asked me to do something that was illegal. Flat out illegal. And when I told him no, he threatened to fire me. Okay, I mean, that's always a possibility. Yes? Oh, I flat out told him it was illegal. So the question was, did he know that it was illegal when he asked me? And I flat out told him it was illegal. You know what he told me? I don't care, do it anyway. So I had a conversation with our general counsel. Then we went back and had a conversation with the CIO. I did not do it. There are times where you have to say no. Now, sometimes you have to say no because you have to protect the people you're dealing with. Sometimes you have to protect yourself, protect the organization. But anybody that ever tells you you should never say no, they're wrong. It's your job, in some cases, to say no. Just like it's your job to say yes sometimes. How many people have ever been asked to do a job that was not in their job description? Yep. And we have to sometimes. I was on a call. This story might come up again later, but I was on a call the other day, and they called me up, and it was the IT team, who I'm a vCISO for, and a couple of other departments on the line. And the other departments were asking me questions. So I told them the answers. And I got a virtual kick in the knee because what I was saying was technically true, but IT didn't want to do it that way. I don't care that you don't want to do it that way. I was asked a specific question whether or not, because it was about security, and I could provide a secure method of doing what they needed to do. It was actually fairly easy. But IT didn't want to do it that way. Okay. IT can tell them that. My job is to be able to say, yes, I can do that thing and make it secure. You get the balance? Sometimes you have to say no, sometimes you have to say yes. And you have to have the experience and the training to be able to know which one's which. You don't do it in a bad way, you just have to know when to do it. Here's another one. That will kill someone. I've actually said that to IT specifically, and they don't like hearing that one. Why do you think they don't like when you say that will kill someone? That's liability on them. So it's my responsibility to bring it up, because if they don't know what they're trying to do is going to kill someone, now people are probably looking at me like, what on security could someone be killed? Well, we talked about, last session, they're talking about medical equipment. This one was specifically life safety equipment, fire alarms and things like that. Heavy machinery. I deal with a lot of manufacturing, so there's a lot of machinery that's on the network. That could kill someone. So in our jobs, we have to think about that. Now, how many people got into IT because they like dealing with people? Anybody? There was we had a half of a hand up. The reality is most people don't go into IT because they like dealing with people. Everything we do in IT and IT security deals with people. It's the services we provide them. It's their data. It's their lives. So somebody has to be able to stand up and go, you know what? We can't do that. That will kill someone. Because we can't be worried about money when we have people's lives on the line. That is illegal. Well, I kind of told you that story. I've actually had several times where I had to go back and tell someone they couldn't do something because it was illegal. Now, part of it is they don't know. You're right, whoever was talking about that. Part of it is they don't think they're going to get caught. Hack back. How many people have ever wanted to hack back? I would advise you not to. Okay, in Missouri, are you guys a one-party or two-party state for recording people? One party? Yeah, so are we. But you have to have that one party, right? So if you put a listening device in a room that you are not going to be in, that's illegal. You can't do that. Well, I had somebody who really tried to get us to do that. I had to tell them, no, we can't do that. We're a one-party state. Somebody in the room has to know. Beyond that, I don't care who knows, but at least one person has to know they're being recorded. That is against policy. I had a situation where this is actually a funny story, funny to me. So I had a different CIO at the time come up, and he wanted me to go do an investigation on someone looking at porn on their computer. At that organization, reasonable personal use of the computer was allowed by the ethics code and the computer use policy. So unless it was illegal porn, there was nothing that we could do based on policy. Now, if you want to fire them for not doing their job, great, go for it. But reasonable personal use of computers was allowed. So he comes up to me and goes, Jonathan, I need you to go investigate this. No. What? No, that is not against policy. I'm not going to investigate that. And he yelled at me a little bit. And it's like, okay, fine. Here's what I'm going to do. I'll go do the investigation, but I will also go and investigate every senior leadership, every one of their computers, and take every website they ever look at and post it across for all students. He didn't like that too well. I ended up actually doing the investigation for a different reason later, and that has a whole other story along with it. But at the time, it was against policy. People have a right to privacy on their computers if it's written in your ethics code or your acceptable use policy, whatever it is. You need to know your own policies so you can help people understand what those policies are. I won't do that. This one we've kind of talked about. You'll be asked about things that you may not want to be able to do, you may not want to do. Again, don't break the law, things like that. This is different though. I can't do that. How many times have you ever been told to do something where you go, I can't do that. I don't have those skill sets. Yeah. Now, what if you don't say that and you mess up? Now you're liable for it. As a CISO, you need to know what your limitations are. If you say, oh yeah, I can do that, and then you erase the Exchange 2010 server and all mailboxes that have been running since 2011, that's a bad day. That's a whole different kind of incident response. You can do that. Now, I try to be fairly agnostic. If somebody comes up with an idea that doesn't otherwise violate security another way or solves a problem, I'm okay with that. But if it violates security or causes liability or risk, I'm going to say something. But we're also in a role, because how many times have you seen, not that you've done it, that you've seen people saying no just out of spite? A few head nods. IT is notorious for it. They just sometimes don't want to do things. Now, I was in IT for many, many years. I am still in IT. And I know, have you guys ever heard of the BOFH, the Bastard Operator from Hell? Few people? If you've never heard of it, go do a search, go read the archives. That is the system administration that I grew up with. Both people that I knew, like people side by side, and people that I dealt with, because I was help desk. So I'd call up the system administrators and say, hey, this is broken. No, it's not. No, it's broken. No, it's not. I was told by a system administrator that I didn't know how to configure Outlook one day. The CIO was sitting in the chair beside me laughing at me because he was telling me I didn't know how to configure Outlook. Do you know how you configure Outlook? In most cases, you bring it up and it sees your username, it configures it on its own. And yet I didn't know how to configure Outlook. Anyway, different issue. Sometimes you do have to say, yes, you can do that, and that's fine. That is not a security problem. There are times when you have a problem that somebody wants you in security to solve for them when it's not anything to do with security. So what do? You just flat say, that's not a security, I don't care how you do it. I mean, you don't say it like that necessarily, but that's the gist of it, is that's not a decision for us. That's an IT problem. That's a risk problem. But don't put it on your own shoulders if you don't have to. This one is really important to me. How many times have you ever said or heard said, it's not personal, it's business? Especially when you fire someone or demote someone or whatever. It's always personal. The reason why we have to realize that is we're dealing with people. I had to fire somebody once. I knew for a fact they were going to go kill themselves. I had no doubt in my mind that they were going to go commit suicide after I terminate them. Should I have terminated them? What do you guys think? Raise your hand if you think, yes, I should have terminated them. Or how about no job is worth someone's life, so just let them keep going.
I would say yes, but for providing help, you don't terminate.
Okay. I can see that. Provide them help, yeah.
Before you terminate.
What's that?
Provide that help before you terminate.
Okay. He was found drunk on our data center floor. Should we have fired him? Yeah. But because he was a significant, yeah, go ahead. We did. We did afterward anyway. This was probably 15 years ago now, so it was very different back then. I will say this: when I had to terminate him. I was told to by the leadership. So when I had him on the phone, because he got suspended, he was not allowed on campus. I read the letter to him, and then I asked him to go to his parents. Now, he was 35, something like that. Go to your parents. Please just go to your parents. 3 weeks later, his dad calls me, and I was really afraid of what he was going to say. And he says, hey, can I come pick up his stuff from his office, his box, the box that you have? Absolutely. And I wasn't quite sure what he was going to do because I hadn't heard what happened. But I was sure he was going to commit suicide. His dad comes up, walks up to me, sticks out his hand. I shake his hand, he grabs me, pulls into a hug, and he says, thank you so much for having him come to us. He's in rehab right now. We're getting him clean. That's great. I still had to terminate him. It's a risk to himself and to the organization. Had he hit the Sapphire system, he could have died from that. It's always personal. We have to realize that. When we're dealing with people, it is personal. It's their livelihood. It's their data. It's their job. We have to realize that, and we have to deal with that. Sometimes we still have to do it anyway, but that was dumb. Now, you could say it a couple different ways. That was stupid. That was dumb. You're an idiot. Try to be nice when you say things like this, but that was dumb. I absolutely will say that. Somebody will say, I said that to a board leadership group. It was a subcommittee. And they were telling, it was an incident, and I walked in, and they were telling me what happened. And to give you a little bit of background, now, please understand, I change stories a little bit so you won't, because it's client data and things, so I change them around a little bit and mix them up a little. But here was the effect. Somebody put an any rule on their firewall for a test at number 2. And then they forgot to take it out. Was that pretty dumb? Yep. So I told them that. They weren't very pleased with me. Not with me. I mean, they were not pleased with the situation. Take a guess at how much that incident response cost. It's about $175,000 for the first 8 hours because someone left a rule on. That was pretty dumb. Sometimes you have to tell people that. I had a situation where we were getting everything ready. We had to be up by 8 o'clock 2 days from now. We got everything running the first night. The second day we were supposed to finish up and just kind of finalize, make sure everything was okay, turn everything on by Monday at 8 o'clock. This is Sunday morning. Walked in, and this person, overnight, this is IT administrator, thought he'd be helpful And he made a whole bunch more changes on the system outside of the control of the AR team. Those changes cost us another $75,000 to fix because they didn't work. And then we had to go through the process again to get us back up and ready. That was dumb. And I did tell the board that when they asked me, on the report, why did you have to do this a second day? And it's like, here's the reason. Now, I don't say that that's what we needed to do at that time, but there are times in which you do need to recommend termination. Now, I've got a good friend of mine who's an HR, VP of HR, and we talk about this a lot. I don't fire people as a CISO. HR fires them. I can recommend they get fired, but rather what I do is we had this situation, we had somebody that was very high risk. They fell for a scam on their phone of a girlfriend who asked him to send a full nude. So he took the picture and he sent it to her after lots of conversation, by the way. It wasn't just a one-off thing. And they says, well, thanks for sending this. Please give us $30,000 or we're going to post this on your company's Facebook page and say that you sent this to our 12-year-old daughter. Okay. Was that a terminable offense? What's your thoughts? Do you think you would recommend for that person to lose their job because they sent a picture of themselves over their phone, over text, and they told you about it? No, actually, it wasn't. It was a personal phone. Okay. You guys, so the answer is no, he was not at work. It was not a company phone. You guys have good questions. Let me add one more piece to it. This person had fallen for another scam that he told me about when I did my interview with him. This was actually his third time falling for the scams. The first one, he cashed out his 401k and sent them all the money. Oh, it gets better. Here's another piece to it. This person effectively had root access to all data. So now, should we have terminated him? Oh, you guys weren't so sure earlier, though. I mean, some of you people are, kind of mean. It's like, fire him. But now, I did have to recommend, and the way I recommended it, and I did a formal CISO recommendation, which I encourage the use of. So I did a formal CISO recommendation that says this person can no longer have access to any facilities, network, or system related to blah, blah, blah data. And I made it all fancy. So I didn't really care what they did with them as long as that person didn't have access to any facilities, any network, or any system, or any user account. They terminated him. But it was my job to explain the risk to them, that they need to do this. Now, why is it my job? Because I'm smarter than you. Now, please don't ever say it that way. Actually, you can say it that way in some cases. But here's what you've got to do. As a CISO, you need to be the equivalent of the subject matter expert when you walk into that room. If you're in a board meeting, if you're in leadership meeting and you're the CISO, you need to be that person that they go to and they trust to give them good information as it relates to security and privacy. Now that's work for us, what we have to do to meet that expectation. But when you walk in that room, you need to know that as it relates to security and privacy, you are smarter than everybody else in the room. Because that's how you can do your job. They have to trust that. You have to earn their trust by showing you know what you're talking about. My general counsel, my previous job, she would not touch any contract in any way until I had looked at it. Because I teach vendor contracts for IT security professionals, so I go through it for data privacy. She wouldn't even look at it. She goes, nope, this has to go Jonathan first. I got to see every single contract within the organization. I got to. It was, anyway. But she came to me, she goes, listen, Jonathan, you know more about this than I do. I'm going to trust you. Tell me what you need me to do. That's the position you want to be in. You want to have the trust of your leadership and of the stakeholders to be able to provide them good information. Which means you also have to say, I have no idea. There are times you have to tell the truth and go, I don't know. That is not something I deal with. I don't know how that works. I can probably go find out. More importantly, I'm going to go find a SME that's about that and go ask questions. If you have never said, I don't know in a meeting with leadership or other people or stakeholders, you're doing something wrong. Either they're not asking you questions because they don't trust you, or you're lying to them. Please don't lie. Be honest. If you don't know, say you don't know. That's where trust comes in. That's where respect comes in. I'm going to manipulate you. We were just talking about this earlier. He's not over there, but we were talking about this. Our job is to manipulate people. I am manipulating you right now. Does anybody verify that I actually am Jonathan? My name is Jason Smith. No, we all manipulate, and that's the job of a CISO, is to manipulate people in the organization. Generally, you do this for the good of the organization. You convince them to do something different. You show respect to the board, so they show respect to you. Anybody here ever go to board meetings? Who's gone to a board meeting? You ever go to the board meeting in sweats? Nope. You go in a business, probably business attire or a little bit more professional business, formal business, suit and tie, whatever it may be. But why do you do that? Why do you, if you're a guy, why do you put a tie on to go to a board meeting? Perception? Yep. Yep, you want to fit in. You want to show them you belong. If you show them you belong, they're going to think you belong there. So I would much prefer wearing combat boots and cargo pants. As me growing up in the late 90s, high school, untied combat boots and cargo pants or jeans. But instead, my job requires me to be in a suit and tie, in combat boots and cargo pants. But they look like slacks. I am still manipulating people. That's our job. I'm going to walk in, get them to trust me, and then convince them to do good things for the organization. Sometimes you have to tell them that other people are doing it better. Groupthink is a thing. Peer pressure is a thing. Sometimes you have to say, that's going to cost a lot of money. They want to do this thing, that's going to cost a lot of money. That's okay. Tell them that. Sometimes you have to get people to calm down and say, this is not an emergency. Sometimes you have to say, this is an emergency. People will die. So you have to say it. You also have to say, you like being in front of people. How many people here like public speaking? Few. I don't. I don't like being up here on the stage. I speak 150 times a year for different things. I don't like being up here, except for the fact I like helping people. I like getting people to think differently, and they go back to their organization, they do things differently. So I will do it. I become the CISO Jonathan, versus the fake Jonathan, which I was on a panel the other day, and I created an AI Jonathan. It was kind of fun. All right, how do we get better? How do we be a CISO? All the things that we've talked about today, how do we get better? First of all, you have to build yourself. Training. If you want to learn to manipulate people, go take an acting class. That's what I did. If you want to learn how to manipulate people, go learn magic. You learn so much about people by learning how to do magic. It's great. Experience, time in grade. The more experience you have, the more stories you can tell. The more stories you can tell, the more trust you might be able to get from the leadership. Communication. Learn how to communicate. Learn how to go up and talk to people. It's hard. I found it hard today trying to walk through the vendor floor. I didn't want to talk to anybody. It's just in the nature. I understand it, but when I'm a CISO, that's my job. I had this saying about I lace up my boots. I told my wife, I got to lace up my boots and go be a CISO. And she didn't understand what it meant. Till one day, I laced my boots up before I left that day. And she goes, you really do walk differently when you lace up your boots. Literally, I mean lace up the boots. It'll make you walk different. For me, that was putting on my uniform back from law enforcement days. When I do that, I communicate differently. I engage differently because that's part of the job. Build the community. Do you think being a CISO is hard? Does anybody really know what a CISO is? That's what I was finding in Oklahoma, that it was really hard to get people to understand what a CISO is. If you go to a conference, how many people have ever gone to a security conference where they've got a capture the flag tournament going on? And lock picking, and all kinds of different things. Have you guys ever seen anything for CISOs? So we created the Oklahoma CISO Showdown Championship. Are you going to zoom in? Now, I am not currently the champion, but I stole his belt. I was a champion last year. But one of the things I wanted to do was I wanted to highlight CISO skills, which are very different than security skills. So we created the showdown. And we go to a couple of different conferences a year, and two CISOs get up on a stage, and we compete back and forth. Audience gets to ask us questions, and we have to answer. Then the audience gets to choose who's going to be the CISO champion for that season. I've had more people come up to me afterward and say, Jonathan, I never knew that that's what CISOs did. I had a master of cybersecurity student come up to me last time. He came out of the Army, he went and got his master's. He goes, Jonathan, I feel like I got screwed in my courses. They didn't cover any of that stuff. He goes, how do I learn it? Well, training, experience, and communications. Go out and talk to people in the community. Come be part of it. Build the community. If you can build that community, then that is a huge thing. It does suck carrying 12 pounds of a belt around at a conference all day long. All right, be a leader. A CISO is a leader. How much time do I have, guys? Perfect. Okay, you need to be a leader. What does that mean? You have to build relationships. How many people have talked to this was a question, previous session. How many people have talked to their general counsel today? This week? This month? This year? How many people here have never talked to their general counsel? Okay, go talk to them. Better yet, in martial arts, we have this concept of getting to know your partner. So we have the Kodanja, which is a master level test. It's 8 days long. I am eligible to take it this year. I was eligible to take it a couple of years ago, but I just couldn't do it. I don't want to do it. It's scary. It's 8 days. But one of the things they talk about is need to get to learn other people. Learn about them. So everyone will go around And they will, where you're from, what's your wife's name, what's your kids' names, what you like to do. That has nothing to do with getting to know them. It's getting in the trenches and training for 15 hours a day. You get to know people. I was on a phone call just before lunch of a general counsel, an external counsel that I know. I have worked with him more in the middle of the night than I have during the day. When you get working with people, you learn to trust them. Or you learn not to trust them. Some cases, sometimes that happens. But you learn to trust them. Going through the process of hardship, working through problems, they get to trust you, you get to trust them. When I say go and build relationships, go and work with people, don't just take them to lunch. That's great. Go take them to lunch, they get a free lunch. But work with them, ask them questions, have them ask you questions. Build the relationship. Do that with HR, do that with accounts payable, do that with purchasing. I know those are the same in some organizations, by the way. Go work with your leadership. I've been very, very fortunate that when I was a CISO for an organization, I always had good, strong relationships with the board. They trusted me. If I said I needed this thing, they would say, there you go. We trust you, go get it. But you know what I did after that next month? I came back with a summary, an update of what we did, how we did it, what were the benefits, and how we're improving the organization. They didn't even have to ask for it. I already had it for them because I wanted to build that relationship. Legal, HR, employees. How many people here talked? You guys are security professionals. How many people here talk with their employees just on a daily basis? Across the company. Not your IT or IT security, but randomly go into, I don't know, again, accounts payable, and just talk to people. Do they know you? Do they trust you? Great. Go strike up a conversation. We got attacked during a red team exercise. I know I'm losing time. And in the pen test reports, they says, whatever phishing protection you have, keep doing it. Whatever you paid for, it's well worth it. I didn't have any. What I did have is every single time a person got a phish and they forwarded it to me personally, I said thank you. It may have been a campaign of 1,000 emails and they all forwarded it to me. All night long, I'd go in there, hey, thanks for sending this to me. I appreciate that. I said thank you. So whenever the pen test came, the phishing, what we do Noble for and NGO and things now, I didn't have that back then. But they could not get a hook in because everyone distrusted everything and they forwarded it to me. And I'd say, yep, this is bad, or no, this is good. So I was the phishing thing. But I was really proud of my staff. They all knew me. They knew me personally. They also respected me that they didn't waste my time, but they knew that they could go to me if it was an emergency or if it was something important. Where'd it go? All right, don't be afraid. All the things that we've talked about. How many people are getting those queasy feelings like, I'm never going to be able to go do that to my board? Anybody? Everyone's just like, man, Kimmitt is crazy. There's no way we're going to be able to do this. I'd get fired in a heartbeat. Okay. Build your own confidence then. Number one, know what to do. You do that from experience and from training. Know what to do. Know how to do it. So if they ask you questions, you can answer the questions. Know why you do it. Because you're going to have someone like me that might be a board member is going to call me and is like, hey, Jonathan, you worked on this other thing. I've got this thing going on. This person is trying to do this. And I'll give him my honest opinion. Judges like doing that. Judges like calling CISOs and say, hey, I've got this case going on. I can't tell you about the case, but this thing, can you tell me about it? So I'm pretty confident in what I know. I'm pretty confident in how I do it and why I do it. I'm also confident in know what I can't do. So if I don't have any experience on that, I just say that. Blockchain. How How many people have ever dealt with blockchain? Real big thing a couple years ago. I was doing a lot of speaking engagement. I had 4 or 5 people reach out to me one day. They were going to pay for my travel around the world for me to go talk about blockchain. 4 or 5 different countries. It was for a group. I didn't know anything about blockchain. Still don't know a lot. That's not something I deal with. So I handed it over to someone that did know. I said, guys, I would love to. I don't know anything about it. I'm learning it too. There's this other guy you can contact. He got all expense paid travel, 3 or 4 different, Abu Dhabi and all kinds of different things. He had a great time. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't want to tell anyone I knew anything about it. Maintain your resume. Now, there's going to be a situation which you have to tell the organization something they don't want to hear. And you can manipulate, you can earn trust, and sometimes you might get fired. The one thing I didn't do is I was going to go grab, how many people here have their CISSP? Okay. You guys actually read the agreement, the ethics agreement that you signed when you got it? Yep, twice? Well, there's a section in there that you are responsible for maintain your certification, that you need to report bad things, even if you lose your job. Now, most people don't think about that when they're in the middle of a situation and your CIO is telling you to do something illegal. You're just like, man, I've got my kids and I've got school and I've got all this other stuff I got to pay for, and no one's ever going to find out about it. And it's not really that bad. And it really is the information of the organization. But you signed that ethics code. The more certifications you have, the more ethics codes you sign. That's an agreement. Furthermore, that's your word. And that means a lot to me. So, if you're in a situation where your organization is putting you in a bad spot and there's no way around it, maybe it's time to move on. I had a guy call me up one day. I have about 3 minutes. Perfect. It was a recruiter friend of mine. And he used to call me up. It was weird. He'd call me and goes, Jonathan, I've got this job description. I don't know where to look at. Okay. So he read it off, and I'd tell him to go what kind of company to go look for and what kind of person to go, try to recruit. He goes, Jonathan, I've got this job for you. It's like, okay. He goes, it's for an organization here. I can't tell you what it is unless you're really serious about it. It's like, okay. And he says, they're offering $250,000. All right, so $250,000 per year to go work there as a CISO. I was like, okay. And that's pretty good for Tulsa area. What's the job description? Oh, well, you need to have at least a GED, no certifications, 1 to 2 years experience. Can you give me that job description one more time? Oh, yeah, absolutely. You just need to have a GED, 1 to 2 years experience, no certifications. And they're paying $250,000. Now, if you guys heard that, what would you think? Scapegoat CISO. I have a whole section in my book that I'm writing for the field manual that talks about the scapegoat CISO. So I asked some more questions. I finally figured out what it was. I figured out the organization, and I knew the CISO. He was part of the ISSA group. So I went and asked him. I was like, hey, how come you left? CISOs talk, by the way. And he goes, well, let me tell you. And he just laid into me. He's like, oh, okay, well, understood. I'm glad I didn't go there. But it was a scapegoat. But you could tell. It was somebody who was going to go into an organization, there was going to be a problem, they were going to get fired. So be really careful. Now, all of this stuff, I hope, because I think that's my last slide, I hope that you guys aren't afraid of being a CISO, especially if you are CISOs. I don't want you to go, screw this, I'm out of here. Instead, what I want you to do is think about being maybe a bit more aggressive, maybe more intensive, intentionally try to make changes in your organization. Try to build that relationship, build that trust, so that you feel comfortable walking into a leadership meeting and say, guys, that was a dumb decision. You need to fire this person, and it's going to cost a lot of money to fix this. And you want them to go, you're right, Jonathan. How do we do it? Now, maybe not in those words. But sometimes you have to use those words. Words have power. It's your job as a CISO to be able to use every tool that you can to make changes. Why? Why do we make changes in the organization? To protect people. That's our job. It's not a job for everybody. A lot of sleepless nights. But you do get to carry around a cool belt. All right, thanks everyone. Appreciate it. Just in time. There's Kim.